The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by Tuity Fitness and the Vegas Beer Guys.
Everything Sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Wayne's World 2 edition. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards, coming to you from Pacific Beach, and of course, the man from Chula Vista, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, excited lover of Wayne's World 2. Say hello, Tom.
Oh, Dick Van Dyke Show.
Oh my God. There were small jokes like that.
Yes.
Like replete through the movie that warmed my heart and made me so happy. And part of it was that I knew that there were people, say, age 30 and younger, that wouldn't have a fucking clue what he's talking about.
Right.
And I'm so glad that I do.
But it's interesting. You're absolutely right. There is that kind of elitist, that savviness that that it's a cultural savviness that he's playing to.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that it's a trade-off sometimes between what's going on in media now and
right.
But he has the thing, and I said this when we did Austin Powers, it's the thing that always puts Mike Myers above other auteurs in this ilk for me, is that depth of knowledge of film history and the overall media literacy, and the fact that he can just pull out that reference from his ass. It seems like, I mean, it looks like an improv.
Because
it's
it could, we
it's
don't
certainly
know.
not a big. It's certainly not a big moment,
Right.
Like it's an offhand reference. The fact that he can just pull that out of his ass at any given moment is what makes is what keeps me coming back to Mike Myers, because I know he's not just going to try and sell me on what the latest thing is. He's going to pay attention to what's going on in the media around him. That's why we have Jurassic Park in this movie.
Yeah.
Well, and Aerosmith, and a bunch of things which are of the moment. But
because I have a note that it's very Airplane 2 in terms of, like, say, the E.T. reference in a movie that came out the same year.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's just a matter of
because this movie came out in December, but still.
It's exactly the same as Airplane 2. But,
yeah.
And it's exactly the same reason. It's like, everyone's going to be doing it.
Right.
We need to have something. And yet, in terms of execution, it's
because the dinosaur itself looks ridiculous, but amazing. Like, I mean, it hits the exact right tone for
every
a parody of that moment.
Every time.
Yeah.
And, it's... But that's it. It's like you don't... I think there's an attitude towards referencing in this movie that is exactly where I always want it to be in any movie I see, which is, it's like, you don't get this first, you don't get the first reference we're throwing at us. There is something in here that you will understand and appreciate.
Yeah.
And everything to do with Kim Basinger in this movie is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lesser artist in this ilk would simply make this all about 9.5 weeks.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whereas Mike Myers and everyone involved with this, and it's not just Mike Myers, there's a whole heap of talent involved in making this movie. They're going, well, no, we want to also reference classic film noir,
right?
And the Bond movies. Right. Mike Myers is like, guys, she was a Bond girl.
Right.
Not the most famous, but she was a Bond girl.
She was a Bond
She needs
girl.
a Bond girl name.
Yeah. Right.
So it's like, but he thinks like, oh, you don't know 9.5 weeks, but you've probably heard of film noir, and I'm sure you've seen a Bond movie. And that's kind of egalitarian in a way that other kinds of postmodern referencing in movies doesn't really necessarily do. And I appreciate, and I think that's because Mike Myers is holistic in his appreciation of pop culture.
And it's, I always really appreciate when I am seeing sophisticated humor
So
delivered in
sophisticated.
such a silly way.
So
that's-
sophisticated.
That's, you know, that's when you're turning coal into diamonds.
I agree, and there's so much of that, it never feels like someone who is doing it because they want you to know they're smarter than you are,
Mm-hmm.
but you know they are
Right.
because of how thoughtfully it's all put together.
And I think I said this in our ranking episode that the first act of this movie, the first half hour of this movie, to me is perfect. Because at one point I just stopped and I wrote a note that said, like, what was my problem when I first saw this movie? Because this movie right now is perfect.
Yeah,
Not just, I mean, in every fashion, as
In
a
every
sequel,
fashion.
as just as a narrative, like
Yeah.
you know, like everything about it is exactly right. The impasse at the beginning of this
oh
movie
my God, Mike.
and how it's handled is sublime.
I have that exact note here. Here's what Mike Myers Wayne says in the first few minutes of the movie. Welcome to Wayne's World 2. Let me bring you up to speed. I mean, have we not? This is
Right.
everything we've talked about. This movie is aware. I mean, not just of sequel conventions, also just general filmic conventions.
Yeah,
but
right.
but in this moment in the movie, it tells you immediately we're aware of how sequels work.
Right. Right.
We understand all the conventions and cliches.
You're not going to do a Rocky. You're not going to see the last 5 minutes of a previous movie.
Yeah.
You're not going to have characters trying to have an exposition dump to explain what's happened
Right.
in between the movies. He's going to look right to camera,
Yeah.
say, "This is Wayne's World 2. Let me catch you up."
But it's also when he says, "Let's take the scenic route."
Yes.
He's also aware that that he's sending up and making a comic virtue of the lengthy exposition and recap montages that are
Right.
needed for a sequel. And
But
yet,
that's
at the
also
same...
right after giving us some Adam West Batman as a reference.
Absolutely. That's very true. That is a sequel. That is like a cliffhanger reference, isn't it? As
Yeah.
well. And then he says, "A year has passed," which I mean spoke
Yes,
to me,
right.
having done this podcast for a couple of years now, an understanding of familiarity with the way that real world and movie timelines work in the worlds of sequels. And I thought, for me, the cherry on the cake, the coup de grace, is there's always a time lapse between a sequel and the original that you have to catch people up on. Something happens in between the movies.
Right.
And here, it's that Garth got pubes. It's like all the information you don't need to know,
Yeah.
prioritized in a big way. And also, Wayne's
Well, but we
increasing
do
body
find
hair as well.
we do find out what's that?
And Wayne's increasing body hair as well.
Yeah.
But
Well, we do
otherwise,
find out about
and they've
Cassandra.
moved to an abandoned doll factory.
Right.
Again, another gag that you could literally throw anything in there as a placeholder, and it wouldn't be as funny as making it an abandoned doll factory. It's like even the slightest details in this movie have a kind of detailed perfection about them.
Yeah.
Even if you're not going to do anything with it, which they don't do anything with the abandoned doll factory, but just the knowledge that they're inside, potentially inside a Twilight Zone episode, I think is fantastic.
That's great.
But I absolutely agreed with you that, and the other thing that makes me think this movie's working on a level that is high as the best kinds of comedy in this period is the kind of, they make a point of switching between the videographic quality of the cable show
Yeah.
and the film, And that's what the Larry Sanders Show is doing at this exact moment.
Right.
And I can just tell Mike Myers knows.
Well, and I
that
think
that's
Mike
a
Myers
fun
would have done it.
postmodern way to play
Actually,
with
I don't know.
images.
Did the sketch of Wayne's World predate Larry Sanders?
Yeah, but I mean, but the way that, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that was, I guess, all on TV. Like, it was all in the same
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
I get
grain.
that, but even when that sketch would come up, you'd see the title, the card of the guy with
Yeah.
the camera, and it would say, public access Aurora.
Well,
and
and here
it would have that sort of
yeah.
public access feel to it, even in
Definitely,
that, so.
Yeah, it's. I mean, to me, it's all part of the same pie,
Mhm.
But yeah, Mike Myers is definitely at the forefront of it, and I love in this early scene how we go back to the roots of Wayne's World as a parody of public access cable, because
Mhm.
they talk about Plant World and Cooking World.
Yeah.
I just,
right.
I think it's excellent. Yeah, all the
Wasn't
way
one
through.
not the KKK, but wasn't one white supremacy show
Yes.
that got booted off or something like that, so then the
Yeah.
times all worked for their
Absolutely, yeah.
switching? That was funny.
Yeah. So I think that and that's the opening scene in the movie is already shot through with amazing stuff, and we haven't really got started yet.
I know. Right.
And in very in what you said about it works as a narrative.
Mhm.
Here we get the roots of a good narrative, emotional through line that'll take us through the rest of the movie.
Right.
Wayne,
Because he's
Rite du
saying directly
Passage,
into
Ray-
camera.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
like-
talking about, growing up.
Growing, he said, yeah, growing up. This movie's going to be about me growing up, and we also very efficiently, by starting with them filming the TV show, we show that it's going to be Wayne and Garth again, and we're going to have the crew from the original movie as well. It's like we're getting the band back together.
For sure.
So that's the legacy part of the movie taken care of. But we're also told that this movie is going to have its own story.
Mhm.
And I said this with the Mike Myers Myers movie. His movies work best when there is this emotional through line that you can grab onto,
Mhm.
and this movie has that from minute one.
Yeah. I felt like, well, I'll save it till later in the
Okay,
episode, but
you think that dissipates?
I don't think it dissipates, but I mean, it's such a minor quibble. But when he breaks up with Cassandra, I'm thinking this is a necessity of the screenplay.
Yeah,
As opposed to they've made me feel as though Wayne would break up with her in that moment. I can't imagine Wayne breaking up with the person of his dreams.
I can't imagine anyone breaking up with
Because every
Tia
time he
Carrere
sees her on
under any
stage, he hears
circumstances.
Dreamweaver, and he's
I can't imagine anyone breaking up with Tia Carrere under any circumstances.
right.
I literally just now finished watching an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm from 2006. She has not aged a day.
Right.
Anyway, that's just weird man stuff. Don't want to clunk this
Well,
up with my.
Speaking of the beginning of this movie, now I don't know if I think it was an acting choice. I hope it was an acting choice when we meet Christopher Walken,
Oh, it's a choice.
the nose.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I know it's a choice. They cast him for a reason.
All I know is he kind of puts his finger to his nose that made me think Christopher Walken is telling us this guy does cocaine.
Yeah. Oh no, that's exactly. I had exactly the same note.
Yeah.
It's like Mark Maron in Glow is like, he came to the set and told them all how this guy would get his coke. It's
Right.
like, oh, 100%. Well, well before that, I just wanna comment on what I think is one of the most perfect comic set pieces in the movie, which is the drive-through.
Oh yeah.
I mean, talk about a perfect marriage of visual and verbal comedy. Everything.
Absolutely.
This is one of my masterclass scenes. It's using all the elements of cinema to get the best possible joke. And a joke that evolves and changes as it goes on. I mean, it's
Right.
just... And yet, you look at it from the outside and you go, that is so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so funny? It's so simple. But it's simple because... It seems simple because it's effortless.
Yeah.
And yet, when you break it down, you're like... You switched in the middle from visual to verbal comedy, and then you switched to a character joke, and then you went...
Well, and for the benefit of the audience, explain what we're talking about in case they didn't watch it before.
We're talking about Wayne ordering food from a
head.
drive-through. Yeah,
Speaking
which is
into a head.
speaking into like a giant head model, and he's cutting out every other word to try and get a free meal because there's a sign there that says if we don't get your order right, the meal is for free. But the punchline is that the animatronic head hears everything perfectly clearly and repeats back
Their order back to them.
Yeah. And after that, we get to the Aerosmith gig. Now, I don't care for Aerosmith. Never have done. Never will. I love this sequence.
We'll add to the
I
long
did
list
not
of
mind-
things you don't like or...
Well, I know. But I think there's a lot of people who'd be on my side when it comes to Aerosmith. Less, it's not a Judi Dench where everyone's like, "What's the fuck's wrong with you?" I think some people will be like, "Yeah, Aerosmith, little bit mock rock," but I don't know what it is about Mike Myers movies and integrating musical performances.
Right.
Done so.
Because we had this with
deftly.
Alice Cooper in the first
Right.
movie.
And there's just
Millie
something.
Waukee.
But there's two different ways in which, for me, this sequence works. One is that it's a musical performance, which is actually really well filmed.
It was in San Diego, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. They were actually performing in San Diego, and they
Wow.
got... I can't
Okay.
remember if they waited until the whole concert was done, and then Aerosmith came back out, and they got what they needed for the movie, maybe?
Yeah.
I think it went like that.
But it feels like, but that's it. It captures the feeling of a real concert.
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest bugbears in movies is that whenever you have like a concert, it's like it always feels too quiet.
Right.
That there's too
Same
much
with
space
sports
between
movies.
people. And that's just not how concerts are, and for some reason I didn't feel that here, but also the quality of gags
Oh, the
in
pizza
the middle
guy?
of all this. The pizza guy,
The crowd
the mo-
surfing pizza guy?
Garth setting fire to a metal
Yeah.
guy's hair, and it looks pretty dangerous. Maybe
It
that's
really-
why it's
yes.
so funny. But
I
it
have a
just,
note here
his
that
entire
says
head
this guy must
breaks
have
out
been paid
into
extra,
flames.
or it's a wig or whatever. But
Yeah,
I have a note here that says, man, they really let that go.
and it's just like it's when you get great, what I would call pop cinema, like it brings together what's great about music videos and music concerts and movies, or the Beatles movies, and when they're working, this is what it feels like to me. And I don't like Aerosmith. I would not pay money to see these people, and yet I'm just loving every second of this.
Yeah.
And then we get into Christopher Walken, and again from a sequel angle, this is hilarious because we're doing the same storyline again.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happened with Rob Lowe in the last movie.
Of course.
Except he was a TV producer. Now Christopher Walken's a record producer. And yet at the same time it's an inversion, because the shtick with Rob Lowe was that he was smarmy, but you thought he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Whereas now that they've recast him as Christopher Walken, you have no illusion that this guy,
he's a good guy.
this guy is the villain of the piece, and that he's upfront about being the villain to everyone he meets.
Right.
Like he does not schmooze them at all.
He calls him Dwayne.
it's just sort of perfect.
Yeah.
But we're still backstage, and we see, and I was delighted to see Bob Odenkirk and Robert Schmeigel as the nerds.
Oh my gosh. Because
This-
I completely forgotten about that. And when they walked up,
Yeah.
I was delighted.
And for those of you who don't know, Bob Odenkirk is Saul Goodman from Breaking Bad, also Mr. Show. Robert Schmeigel is Triumph, the insult comic dog,
Correct.
and was the showrunner of the Dana Carvey Show,
Yes.
which there's a great documentary on Hulu about.
Murderer's Row of comedy people writing that show.
Exactly, yeah. And both this and the when you hear Harry Shearer in the car on the way over,
Yeah.
it just made me think, it's like, wow, this might be better to watch this film in 2022. Because now you have a sense of what the people in it can do
Right.
better than you had then.
I had the same feeling. When they walked up, I thought, all these guys found each other early
Yeah.
on, and they all
Yes.
knew, Yeah. And
It just
it was
kind
a
of
delight to see that
Yeah.
that they had all found each other. They had found their people and had carved out their performance lives, with each other.
and even the content of that scene, the fact that there's a hierarchy in nerddom
Yeah.
is really interesting, because there's a number of ways in which this movie is really prophetic. Like, this is what I mean. It just what it said in 1993 has just grown and grown and become more true. And one of the
Because now it's a badge of honor to say I'm a nerd
it's a badge of
when it wasn't back then.
But you realize that Wayne and Garth see themselves as a different class of nerd from this
exactly.
kind of nerd, and that's what
I don't think they see themselves
all about.
as nerds at all.
Yeah.
That
Right. Exactly.
They're heavy metal nerds, not recognizing that they're heavy metal nerds.
But when you think today of the deep set divisions between different kinds of fandom,
Yeah.
it's like it was all here. Like it was all here for the taking.
Yeah.
Mike Myers figured it out before anyone else did.
Yeah.
And there's numerous examples of that. And shortly after this, we get in our first Vision Quest.
Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here talking about Wayne's World 2, one of our 3, well, technically 4, but we're going to talk about 3 and reissue a 4th, 1993 sequels. We haven't talked about this. We didn't talk about, so it's directed by Steven Surjik.
Oh yeah, give us the statistic corner. Come on. Yeah.
He's done nothing else except television. It's just so
baffling
strange.
to me. Directorially, this movie is
Yeah.
on point.
So, and I mean, I think I'm right.
Sad.
I look at him on IMDb. I literally do not see any other movies, just television. Good television, plenty of varying different kind of
Yeah.
things. But,
Maybe, I mean, the other possibility is that Mike Myers is doing everything and just needed a marquee name,
yeah, but if he'd
To get-
never
to
done
get the union
anything
off his back.
before, he's not really a marquee name, is he?
No, true. So I don't understand it. I have to say, like, I was always impressed, and I think comedy direction is one of the hardest
Yeah.
things you can do. And at no point did I think he fluffed any aspect
No.
of that.
And well, I don't know if it's famously, but fans of the series at the very least know that the first movie was directed by Penelope Spheres. I don't know how to say her last name. But as I recall reading, she did not come back because, and we've heard this before with Mike Myers, she didn't want to deal with Mike Myers.
Or Michael Myers.
that was a slip.
Like, either I'm going to get condescended
Or
to
stabbed.
by a guy with an Asian fetish, or I'm going to get stabbed in the heart.
So there's that.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe you know, it's just about getting a director who knows how to take orders.
Yeah, right. So this movie had
And
60.
With this kind of quality,
Right.
I'm not complaining.
This movie had 60%.
You suffer for
this
your
movie had
art.
60% on Rotten Tomatoes
Oh, that's low.
compared
That's
to
horrifically low.
the first movie, which I believe had I think it's 78%.
That's,
And
that speaks to how people immediately dismiss sequels out of hand when they should be paying close
Right.
attention to them.
well, and the other thing, so this leads me, like, they increased the budget by $20 million. This movie had a budget of $40 million.
Yeah.
Opening weekend of 13.5, only 48.1 in the USA, like 48,197,000 in the USA, and then I believe 48,198,000 in the world. I always love it when that happens. But
It's interesting. I mean, that's always interesting. I think when it comes to Mike Myers, I have a feeling a lot of my my fellow Brits picked up the slack because you know he's British. I mean, he's British
Right.
Canadian, but his parents are from Liverpool, and I don't know. I think British filmgoers relate to him. Also, he relates to us. I mean, he understands comedy in a very transatlantic way that a lot of American and Canadian comedians simply can't get
Right.
to. So I can see why in Europe and specifically Britain.
But I also, one of my biggest notes for this movie, you referenced this as we were going to commercial, we go to the dream sequence. This movie has a $40 million budget, which may have hurt it in the sense of, I think that's why people think of this movie as a failure, because it didn't make as much money as the first one, and it barely eked out past its budget. But that money is on screen.
Yeah.
They're walking on in a desert. They're there. Him and his half-naked Indian friend, along with Jim Morrison.
I sort of think because when Matt Aldrich was on the show, you know, he talked about how he thinks with comedy, money is the enemy of comedy. I think I probably agree with him in general, but there are some notable exceptions.
This is one of them.
And this would be one of them. This would be one of them, but part of it is, like, you can... it's not... It's like... They bake in the idea of film economics into the movie. They fly to England.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a couple of doubles seen from behind who look nothing like
Right.
them, with voiceovers from Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. I mean that's more than just economics. They're talking about film
Right.
convention and film language, but I don't know that all. It's like well, you know, we're not
Because they're also
haplessly-
commenting on sort of...
Yes, we're using money in a very imaginative and inventive way.
Right, but we're also
That
we're talking about
recognizes
how
that
other
films
movies
have
can do this in a
budgets.
contrived way, trying to fake
Yeah.
you out.
Right.
So And I love all of that.
I think it's I think, as I said, I think it's a work of genius, one of the great first film works of postmodernism. And I think once.
Oh, I had a question for you.
Yeah,
because I think
go
it's
for it.
right around this. Basically, this is when we're finding out we have the dream sequence, and Wayne finds out that he's got to start Wayne Stock,
Wayne Stock, yeah.
and he goes.
This is the other narrative strand of the movie that we can
right,
latch
that goes
onto
through.
as viewers. Yeah.
But like I said, I think that strand falls in and out in the second act quite a bit for stuff that I love. The stuff with Kim Basinger, all So you're again, it's a quibble, but
No, it's
my question for you was: they go to the permit office, and we essentially have the same joke as Goldfinger or Goldmember, except instead of a mole, we got the eye.
Yeah.
I was wondering which one you found to be funnier.
Do you have to even ask? I just think
it's this one.
Another perfectly perfectly executed sequence of gags.
But
And
it's
again,
funny to me that it's the same gag that we didn't find funny in that movie.
They nailed it the first time
but it
round.
completely works in this movie. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a different time. I suppose it's somewhat of a different kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything is clicking here, which helps. But it's all. I mean, it's the fundamentals of comedy,
Right.
but applied with, with kind of pinpoint precision. I think that's what's lacking
Maybe.
in there. And I guess when I think about the mole joke in Goldmember, it's like what I remember is that there's an ability to move beyond the central joke.
Yeah.
Of everyone can't stop staring at the mole. Whereas, here there's much more to it. That that they expand beyond the joke just enough for it to build to something. And one of the great things about the way comedy works in this movie is that the comedy builds.
Yes.
Like, this is like an open textbook on how you take a joke from its root to its climax.
Mm-hmm.
And they do this again and again in the movie. And one time I think they do it better than any other movie I've seen. But certainly here, and it's sometimes simply a matter of going, well, here's the visual part of this gag, and now we're going to shift into the verbal part of this gag. It's the same gag, but it doesn't seem like the same gag because we're a different kind of humor.
You're right.
It's absolutely beautiful. I want to just briefly go back.
What I like is sometimes you don't realize, say, how many idioms we have involving the word "I" until this comes along.
Yeah. It's like it's in a completely positive way.
Right.
It's like watching someone wring out a comedy sponge to the point where it is absolutely dry. There is no more joke you can make. And that's a very fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you fuck that up, you get some of the qualities of the Austin Powers movies where it's like, we can't stop making the same joke. The joke ended 2 minutes ago, we're still making it. But it never feels like that here. I think it's just about knowing when to stop, knowing when the scene's
You're right.
over.
It probably goes on longer in the Goldmember as well.
Well, it's a runner as well.
Yeah.
This isn't a runner. Maybe that's the trick. This is a set piece,
Also,
and it's also the end of the scene.
Yes.
There's a whole other scene in there. There's other stuff happening.
And also Kevin Pollak, hysterical.
Oh, he's so good.
He's
so
funny.
so good. I just to. So you mentioned that he goes into a dream in which there's a half naked Native American and Jim Morrison, who were his spirit guides.
That's what we have.
This was one of the moments where 1993 was all
Yes.
over this. Because it's like that early 90s fetishization of Native American culture plus
We get right into
early
the sweet
90s
spot.
fetishization of 1960s Eastern mysticism in one.
But also it reminded me of Naked Gun 33 and a third, who wanted to do the Untouchables bit in 2.5, but felt like they weren't far enough removed.
I have exactly the same note.
And this movie hits right in the pocket of referencing Field of Dreams, and
That's my note. If you book them, they will come. It's like 4 years is a good amount of waiting. That's it. You got to know how long to wait before you make the reference. And 4 years is pretty good. I think that was about the same length of time between Untouchables and Naked Gun 33 and the third as well. It was in that range.
But you're getting that kind of stuff, but you're also getting, say, late 60s and in the 70s martial arts references as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say his go-to, Mike Myers' go-to is 60s, 70s pop culture. But
like you said, he clearly has an Asian fetish.
Batman 66, James Bond.
But for everything.
Rock music of the 60s. With Jim Morrison and Grateful Dead. Roadie culture, Woodstock itself, which is, the through line of the movie is that we're recreating Woodstock. But in addition to that, like, dense media literacy that always impresses me about Mike Myers' comedy, I think it's this Python-esque note of the absurd that he puts in that puts him over the top.
So when he meets Cassandra's father, and how quickly James Hong says, "I must fight you," to me was just perfect. The fact that they were devolving into a fight so quickly, and then bits within the fight, like answering the telephone.
That's it. Yeah. And what is it? What is the subject of conversation? The Sports Illustrated football phone, which comes back again and again, because there are no throwaway gags in this movie. Everything matters because it's a perfectly self-contained piece of work. The first instance of that I noted was earlier on in the movie when Wayne is doing basically the usual suspects in the recording studio. Like Christopher Walken is asking him what bands are there, and he's just naming things that he sees in the room. And then Rip Taylor is there for no reason, and he says, "Rip Taylor."
Confetti.
Yeah. And I was like, again, a lesser movie, a lesser comedian would not think to go to that level, would think to go to that left field. And it's also The Usual Suspects, which is yet to come out, and he's sort of done it in a movie in 1993.
It's insane.
It's absolutely insane. And when we get to London, talk about like a niche understanding of like cult cinema and cult comedy cinema. When we go to London, they go to get a roadie that Jim Morrison has recommended to them, who is both played by and is essentially Ralph Brown's character from With Nail and I.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's the same character. Del is based on a drug dealer character from Bruce Robinson's With Nail and I with Richard.
See, I just remember him as 85 from Alien 3.
And he's also what's the name of the guy who says everything that's happening in The Phantom Menace? Rick Olay.
Says everything.
No, he does.
Johnny
they talk about this on
says
Star
what he
Wars
sees.
Minute. He says, he says what he sees when they're going to the planet. He says the whole planet is one big city. You rewatch The Phantom Menace. Rick Olay is only there to say what's happening on screen. He's there for the blind people in the audience. But this is like a kind of J.W. Pepper style revival of a character in Superman 2. Because this is exactly the same character. He looks the same. He talks the same. He's the same kind of character. One is a roadie. One is a drug dealer. That is so niche. Like, that's ridiculously niche. But what they're talking about is, again, talk about prophetic. Jokes about Keith Richards dying. That's our bread and butter in comedy now. Probably not in 1993. Jokes about bands that keep touring when they're too old to be doing it. I mean, that is just incredible. And it also lets me know that that Mike Myers and this screenplay understands what rock music really is in a way that is reminiscent of Spinal Tap, or like people who actually they don't just go for the surface gags. Yeah. They make the jokes about like real life rock and roll. Like history of popular music. It's not just like, oh, look at their hair and they're all fucking each other. It's like, well, there are those jokes, but but we move beyond that. Ed O'Neill.
Oh, I've got notes on Ed O'Neill,
and he's in the original movie, right?
Yes. But I see Ed O'Neill in this movie, and I think, why isn't Ed O'Neill in fucking everything?
But again, this is where Mike Myers is ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Because I do remember there's a time where Ed O'Neill was the guy from Married with Children, and that was it. That was the limit of it. And then everyone found out that he was, this Broadway class actor who came from the Steppenwolf Theatre. David Mamet started putting him in all his movies, and it's like, whoa, he's a dramatic actor and a good one at that. And then this taps both sides of that, and then he goes on to do Modern Family. He's another sitcom great in a different sitcom. This is all of that at once. Like everything you need to know about Ed O'Neill in what is basically a cameo.
Yes. This, and I'll go so far as to say also in Ford Fairlane.
Yes.
Where he's the cop that clearly wants to be a rock star.
And this is also interesting in regard to sequels. Like, there's a lot of recasting here and surrogacy and all that sort of stuff. But when it matters that you're consistent, they do it.
Right.
And the thing that struck me was, and this is such a nuanced thing, when you see that the record producer is the same guy from the end of the last film.
From the end of the movie.
Of course, because the fact that guy's Tuddy from Goodfellas and he has a ponytail, you're not going to forget this guy.
Right.
If you recast this guy, you'd notice. He is not an unremarkable looking human being.
Yeah.
And
you might not know his name, but you know his face.
It's like, it's fine that we're doing Chris Walken instead of Rob Lowe, because that's what sequels do. But at the same time, when you need legacy, we'll give you legacy.
It's also fine you have Chris Farley in both movies, but as different people.
Yes. Well, there you go. That's a nuanced understanding of how sequels work.
Yeah.
We talked about Jurassic Park.
Yes.
The next, one of my favorite gags in the movie is the Kenny G dentist gag.
Right.
But on an analytical level, I just want to say, again, a simple, somewhat obvious punchline, but you're using all the production value and visual flair of cinema to make it happen.
Yeah.
Like the pan over, all the extras in the audience who are enjoying Kenny G so much because they're stupid white people.
And then there's Garth.
Garth getting his tooth drilled.
It's fucking great.
Oh, yeah. And I think
mercy.
compared to other Mike Myers movies, they're pretty sparing on callbacks to jokes from the original movie.
Yeah,
there's a lot of original humor.
I think that's a thing that developed differently once we got into the Austin Powers movies.
It has to be, because even the callbacks they have are enough of a variation that you don't
Yeah.
see it as the same gag. Like we do the Calgon product placement here, and they don't go to town on the product placement joke in the way they did in the last movie.
Right.
But the point is made, and you remember that joke, but you also appreciate
Well, and
this
also,
new joke.
when I saw it in this movie, it delighted me.
Yeah, it's a what I call a lateral gag.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's not. There's no diminishing return. It's just. It's but you know,
Right.
it connects two gags in one line. And I'm just aghast at how they again ring in that comedy sponge. A few vinyl records. Mike Myers is going through them, and he's got a joke for all of them.
Right.
It's like watching Rodney Dangerfield. It's like
Yeah.
or Robin Williams. It's like this guy is just coming out of him like breath. And then we get into
Well, but what's funny is it's always completely in character too.
Yes,
So it's
yes,
different than Robin Williams, you know?
It's better than Robin Williams, yeah,
Right.
and Rodney Dangerfield, if
Yeah.
you want to draw me on it. But it's the same kind of level. It's like, this guy just can't stop making jokes
Yeah.
and good jokes. But this is better because, as you say, it's a film character rather than just a person who can't play anyone apart from themselves. We know, like Mike Myers is relatively a chameleon in that sense. Like he's developed distinct characters distinct from himself.
He has played a character as a game show host,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, come on.
And I guess that's partly his training at Saturday Night Live, I suppose, when you have to come up with a different character multiple times a week,
Yeah, sure.
every week for a year. I mean that's you can't do samey there, or you get fired.
Yeah. All right.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
We're back once again, everyone. Talking about the Steven Surgic Wayne's World 2.
Mike Myers!
Yeah, which, if he actually directed it, should have gotten him more work.
Yeah. Or at least, work with producers who are demanding.
Right.
He would have been a good Michael Bay collaborator.
Mm-hmm. All right, Tom. I mean, we've both been gushing about this movie quite a bit, and yet I still rank the Hot Shots sequel above this one. So
I just don't think it's as well made a movie in the end.
I just think it's so on point, though. I just love that about it. So for me, where this movie fell short for me within the narrative, like I said, the second act goes on for a long time. The second act is, like 45 minutes, and then the third act is about 10 to 15 minutes, where we finally get to Wayne Stock and things are going to happen. And
I'll go as far as saying that I think you could trim 5 minutes off this movie, make it a solid 90-minute movie. And I think you could lose one of the vision quests in order to do that.
agreed.
There's a good one or two many of those.
Yeah. It just felt like as though, hey, we got $40 million. we're going to film all the scenes we can in the desert.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Wayne Stock, for me, just, like I said, falls short within the narrative in the second act. We come in and out of Wayne talking about trying to get it done.
Yeah.
But the things we're replacing it with are hysterical and great. But what was a perfect movie for the first 30 minutes became less so of a perfect movie in that second act. For me.
Fair. I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you, but I
don't care.
No, I do care, and I think it's. I see exactly what you're saying, and to a lesser extent, I agree with you.
The narrative part with Cassandra too just falls short for me.
I wonder whether in any kind of self-referential movie, it's hard to take what you're saying when you're saying Hot Shots.
I know
might do this better, because in any kind of self-referential movie, there's a trade-off between the kind of linear narrative and getting all we want out of the pastiche side of it. And I think this, overall, in the big scheme of things, this movie has that just right. And I never feel like the narrative is slowed down too much. Also, the fact that it's also the fact that it's a sequel. Also, the fact that it's a sequel, and it has that kind of desire to sort of remake the original, so all the Cassandra stuff plays out pretty much the same way it does in the original movie, but that's done in a very self-aware way. But that absolutely interferes with the progress of the Wayne Stock narrative.
But it leads to funny shit. But I like the village people.
So much funny shit.
I like the village people scene.
My favorite scene in the movie.
Really?
By a mile.
I think
my
it's
favorite
so
scene
funny.
probably in any comedy movie.
By the time they come together and start running down the street, because you could possibly miss it.
That's what's beautiful about it. Because it starts off first of all, it starts off as a Mission Impossible gag.
Yeah, right.
Which I'm already fine with. Like, if that was what I'm like sold.
But again, before Mission Impossible movies start coming out.
Yeah, I know. He's on the cusp of everything, Mike Myers, it seems. But that's a distraction. They're setting up a gag that you can't see.
Right.
By making you think it's a Mission Impossible pastiche. Just the sheer fun of them running away from Christopher Walken to surf music, like it feels like we're in like a Beatles movie or a Beach Boys movie.
Also, watching Christopher Walken run at full speed, just in and of itself is both remarkable and funny.
And here's something that is kind of, again, quite a nuanced thing, but I think puts this over other similar set pieces that I've seen like this. When they go into the Toolbox, which is the gay club that
they just find themselves in, yeah.
It's the right song playing.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's actually the song you would get in this kind of bar. It's not caricatured. It's not Hollywood gay club. It's like it feels like a real place. Right. Like, Mike Myers has actually been in one of these places, or whoever the production designer is like, nah, the DJ table's here. This is a song that's playing. Mm-hmm. This is what the guys look like. And then, to build that to the YMCA number.
Right.
It's just a masterclass in how you build a joke to its climax. To me, and then you add in the Dream Native American, who's from a totally different joke.
You're right.
But then you realize that how much this is planned, like how planned and organized this movie is, because we know we can bring him into that to complete the Village People joke. Mm-hmm. Because he's the missing element of that. It's like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle.
What I love about having him in this scene is it's a bridge to the very end of the movie too, where Rip Taylor shows up.
Yes.
And so Wayne thinks that he's the only person that can see the half-naked Indian man.
Yeah,
And Rip
yeah.
Taylor's,
Yeah.
says whatever he,
Because the humor in this movie has a plan. These are not random jokes. The flow of it has been thought out meticulously, and it made me think. Like I haven't seen the original Wayne's World in a long time. I definitely will after we watch
too.
this series, and I'm not going to compare the two at all, except to say I think this scene should be as iconic as Bohemian Rhapsody is.
Right.
And I don't
know
why
what's
it's
interesting
not,
to
except
me?
that it's in a sequel.
I kept wondering about this because what I remembered this movie trying to do, maybe it was just a music video, because I thought I remembered the closing credits song as the song, the Pat Benatar song.
Yeah.
I thought I remembered that being the Bohemian Rhapsody song of this movie, but it must have just been the music video. They
Right.
must have done a music video, like a reissue of that song with
Yeah.
Wayne and Garth. Because I think I'm remembering the music video as in the movie.
Uh-huh.
And I remember thinking, oh, I don't like it as much as Bohemian Rhapsody. But it's not even in the movie. So,
Right.
anyway. But
Yeah, you have this
YMCA?
issue. I've noticed this.
does work.
It's perfect, and again, it feels like even in a small way, it reignited the popularity of that song.
I don't know.
I don't know if that was a given in 1993. That,
Right.
every shitty discotheque you went into would play that at the end of the night. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I'm not sure because I
Um,
know, when we have Del Preston talking, like training the group.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about what,
In a reference to Full Metal Jacket,
well, not just that, but also An Officer and a Gentleman.
an officer and a gentleman. Yes.
Yet another 1982 film.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I also thought
But I mean,
again,
we're talking about the reference points for Mike Myers.
Yeah.
And we're talking 60s, we're talking 70s, we're talking 80s. I mean, so like you said, the knowledge that he possesses.
And that's the essence of great postmodernism, is that it cherry picks from every era, classic, contemporary,
Right.
all dissolve into one new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's got going for him here. Another element where media literacy makes a huge difference is there's a joke in that roadie training about where Del starts to tell a story about, he says, here's your cyanide pill. And
Right.
I remember when everyone was here's your machine guns. And it's like, that's a funny gag just in and of itself. If you know about Altamont and how violent music festivals in the 60s are, that's twice as funny. 4 times as funny.
Amazing.
And I mean, this leads into, this is where we get the, bless you.
Changing of the weather, Tom. I can't go from rain
know.
to 70 degrees. Jeez.
Don't date our podcast. As if you'd be able to tell.
Right.
I'll date our podcast. We're in the middle of global warming. How about that? Before the world ended. How about that? This is where, like, when we get into their radio appearance, I began to think, there's a comic film legend around every corner in this
right.
movie.
Yes.
It's like, first Drew Barrymore, then fucking
Is
Harry
it just
Shearer.
me, by the way, or doing great accent work?
Yeah.
I thought she was
No
fantastic.
slouch. No slouch. This is where he does his Oh Dick Van Dyke
Yeah.
show. When we get into,
When
I
we
mean,
see Harry
like,
Shearer.
when the joke is that he's called Handsome Dan, but he's not handsome, and
And
then
Ted
the guy you
McGinley-
think is going to be ugly is handsome, right? And that's great. Like, I'm not sniffing at that, but what struck me in the scene was that when I saw Harry Shearer, I thought, oh, there's literally no one in the world who could do this better.
Right, exactly.
This guy has been a DJ and a voiceover actor in real life.
Mhm.
He's also played DJs in The Simpsons and Spinal Tap.
Right.
I mean, you could spend decades looking for someone who could do the job better than Harry Shearer, and you would never find it. And I'm just bowled
and
over by the
also,
class
for
of it
what
all.
amounts to 120 seconds of screen time, Harry Shearer goes out of his way. To me, it was like Harry Shearer did this all on his own. His look,
His look, his sound,
everything
I mean,
about
it's...
it. Again, it's just one of those things that hits the nail right on the head, makes that scene fly in a way it might not otherwise. Because,
Absolutely.
like
And
you
if
said,
it
you have
wasn't-
the exact right person at the exact
no
right
one-
time, doing it exactly right.
How often do you watch a movie and you go, there's literally not... there's no one else who can do
Right.
this. Like, in a finite
Yeah.
sense. If it wasn't so out of context, my quotable would have absolutely been, "Ooh, they keep getting closer."
Yeah.
You have to put that in the context of the scene for it
Yeah.
to be funny. But again, I think that's like Harry Shearer's just in his own little DJ world, and he understands it better than anyone ever has.
Well, and what's great is
because he's lived it and he's parodied it.
he's doing his own parody while still within the narrative. The characters are realizing what's going on with the character and start fucking with him in the classic way those two characters do, even on SNL when it
Yeah.
was just a skit.
Absolutely.
So everything about it works.
It's just it's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. And we have a Tonight Show appearance here, which was another point in the movie where I was like, this is stuff that these kind of movies get wrong when they try and reproduce like real media as we know it.
Right.
Most movies would get this wrong. This looks exactly like the Tonight
Right.
Show. It's like this doesn't happen in every movie. Most movies get this really easy, what you would think would be
Well,
easy
the part
stuff,
of it
this
that's
kind
really great
media
is
pastiche
'cause
wrong.
I'm just assuming they filmed it on the Tonight Show set.
Yeah,
But the part
and-
that they get right is Christopher Walken standing off because he's like
Yes.
Artie.
It's Larry Sanders. Yeah, exactly. They're on a Larry Sanders level of detail when it comes to, and I felt the same earlier on in the movie, and I can't remember a scene in which there's a scene going on of people watching a television show and a scene going on the television show. This is when Mike Myers puts the torch under his neck and says, "Don't try and stop me, I'm the leprechaun."
I was gonna bring the
And I'm like,
leprechaun voice
both
into
sides
it.
of this conversation are funny.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen
Right.
that. Like, I don't like. I've seen it like even in the original Wayne's World. The funny part is what you're seeing on screen, not what they're watching. But the stuff that Tia Carrere and Chris Walken are doing is very
it's funny. And
And
what's great
what-
is you get to watch her.
What Wayne and Garth are
laughing
doing
at her
is fucking
boyfriend.
beyond funny.
Wait, what'd you say?
And what Wayne and Garth are doing is I mean, that's my big takeaway for that. Like the number of times I put a torch under my face and gone, "Don't try and stop me, I'm the leprechaun." They just do. I mean, and it's interesting because this is like whenever you think that there's an excess or a cliche somewhere, the movie comments on it, right? We get the first one of that. It's like the gratuitous nudity of the half-naked Native American guy.
Right.
Then they start
But
to say
because
so
we
late
get
on
early
in the
on when we get Dell saying the thing. What's he say about the exposed butthole or whatever?
yeah.
Was that a bit gratuitous?
And then, you know, they start, as the movie goes on, they say things are happening so late in the film. We get the callback to the chicken melon glass slapstick sequence.
But what's great
which
about
is
that
just-
is it's been long enough that you forgot
You've
about it.
forgotten. Yes. Even though they told you at the time that this was going to be called back at some
And
point.
also-
Say, I wonder if this is...
Also, right after that, because you can see The Graduate coming from 100 miles away. You know that that's going to
Yeah.
be the reference. And yet it still works because he walks into the second Presbyterian church first.
Even before that, because
Oh, we forgot about the good actor bit, too.
oh yeah, no, that's part of what I'm
Yeah.
about to say. But even before that, the detail of having the Mrs. Robinson music disappear when it goes into a tunnel.
Yes,
When the car goes
yes,
into a tunnel.
you're right.
And what struck me there is that not only is that like a great original joke to make in the middle of a pastiche, it's something that the
actual
Graduate
movie.
as a movie might have done.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? To the point where I'm actually confusing it in my mind whether it's a reference to The Graduate or whether this is an original joke, just because it seems like exactly the kind of diegetic, non-diegetic thing they would have done
Sure.
in that movie. So, and that's because Mike Myers understands what he's referencing.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking about understanding what you're referencing, replacing a day player actor with Charlton Heston mid-scene, it's perfect in so many ways.
Well, what I
the
found
only way it could have been more
remarkable-
perfect. The only way it could have been more perfect if it was James Franciscus replaced by Charlton. But that would only work
Oh,
for us.
That would have been great. Meta. But
But do you know what the best part of that is? Well, this I don't know if the absolute best, but
what I
you look that guy up. You look that actor up on IMDb. That guy is a literal day
Right.
player. You just get like nothing but 70s, 80s TV series and supporting roles. So I mean, that joke would kind of work with one of their comedy buddies, but no. Mike Myers is saying we are getting the guy who was in like 3 episodes of The Incredible
Yeah.
Hulk. Like we're getting so that the joke is sublime.
Well, not just
because
that, but
everyone
they-
is doing their job.
what I love is that they allow that actor to over emote.
And he knows exactly
and
how
that
to do
actor
it
knows
because he's
exactly how to play that scene
yes.
for a laugh, but to garner the necessity to be replaced.
Yes. He knows just how much to overact
Yes.
to take himself out of the scene.
Ugh.
And then Charlton Heston comes in and it's exactly what it's that's what's great with both actors are conforming to expectations, but they're nailing those expectations so well that it becomes transcendent in and of
Yes.
itself. Like it's like actually that's the best performance I've ever seen Charlton Heston give in anything.
Right.
And I love Charlton Heston, but clearly Mike Myers has taken them aside and goes like, "Here's the deal: we're not shitting on any of your performances here. We are. This is a tribute to the kind of thing that Hollywood does. This for us having a movie in which there's a bunch of cameos. Like you can clear that everyone understands what they're doing
Yeah.
at any given time." And then another moment of genius in the sequence, which is like a really radical postmodern thing to do. We take out Simon and Garfunkel, we bring in the Lemonheads cover of Mrs. Robinson. I mean, Tarantino did that. You'd be like, oh my God, he's a genius. I just think it's, and I've always felt that, and this is, add this to the list of things I don't like that everyone else does. Never been a huge fan of The Graduate as a movie. I always thought it was a little bit overrated.
Shit.
So when I watch this, I think, yeah, there's definitely room for comic maneuver here.
Mhm.
Like, Graduate's many things. Balls to the wall comedy, it ain't.
Right.
You can get more laughs out of this.
Well,
And he
what
does.
I think is great,
Just as, like you said, with the Second Presbyterian
what I
Church.
think is great is
Fantastic.
that for those that know, and I'm sure Mike Myers knows, I can't stop. But there's also a great parody of The Graduate on The Simpsons,
Yeah.
and he's playing that exact scene, and yet
Yes.
it's not the only joke.
It's not the only... Exactly. No one can stand the sound of Grandpa. Yeah. Whenever I hear Mrs. Robinson now, in my head I go, "No one can stand
Yeah.
the sound of Grandpa."
Well, and of course
Um,
I have, afterwards he gets Cassandra and Wayne Stock is going to be a mild success. At least Aerosmith's going to show up as
Yeah.
is Rip Taylor.
This is Taylor.
But again, we have Iron Eyes Cody humor as well. to
Well,
finish out this movie.
I'm saving that for my credit check.
Okay.
But I love the fact that we talk about a happy ending. We're able to contain our own cliches in a self-referential screenplay framework
Mhm.
with the multiple endings.
Which is also, kind of a callback to, not kind of, but a callback to the first movie. They have the Scooby-Doo ending.
Yeah, it is.
They,
No, absolutely, yeah.
And that's another
then-
thing this movie does so well. It has the jokes you expect to get from Wayne and Garth.
Yeah.
Say, for instance, Garth swinging at every woman that goes by. The swing joke.
I take that out of the movie if I was making it today.
I would today, yes. But at that time,
I don't think there was an excuse even then.
No, probably not. But what I'm referencing is the jokes that you expect in a Wayne's World movie,
Yeah,
and then jokes outside of that.
completely.
And that balance is perfect. Because normally a movie would lean too heavily on the jokes you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
And here, this movie doesn't. It's not
That's
in
right.
there a lot.
No, it's there just
Excuse
enough
me,
to
baking
sort of,
powder. Excuse me, baking powder.
yeah.
That kind of stuff.
It's we have our moment to sort of air out the catchphrases.
Right.
Just take them out,
when they're
give them
there,
a-
it's because the character...
Febreze them a little
it's
bit.
because the character is still saying
Yeah.
it.
Right. And again, that's a very fine line, but again, I think
Yeah.
this movie is on the right side of that line. And then, right, I don't know how many times I've seen this movie. I saw it twice in the cinema, by the way, in 1993. I can still remember my father saying, "You want to go and see this again?" Like, yeah, I do.
That's great.
It's like Groundhog Day's supposed to be good. No, I want to see this again. But I still forget. In the beginning of the movie when Wayne and Garth are kept out of the exclusive backstage area.
Yeah, exactly.
He says,
A lot of
"My
guys have
in there."
girlfriends in there.
A lot of guys have girlfriend in there. Like, as I'm watching that, I go, I know this is important. I can't remember why. And then, because it's the final joke, literally the final joke of the
Right.
movie, and
At Christopher Walken's expense.
at
Which is
Christopher
great.
Walken's expense, we reverse that, which is great. And again, that just speaks to the through line of humor in this movie that you've seen in so many other areas. We haven't even talked about the runner of Dell's telling the same story about Ozzy Osbourne and the M&Ms, which is like, it's funny. The first time he says it is funny because it's a parody of like real life rock and roll stories. It's partially based on the Van Halen Brown M&M story and a bunch of Ozzy Osbourne stories which kind of float around the ether of rock criticism. But for then it to be he's telling everyone the same story
Well, not
over and
just
over
that,
again.
And then in the middle of the movie, without commentary at all, you see them separating M&Ms.
Yeah. The fact that we can keep falling back on this, and yet you develop the joke at the same as it's going on. So the joke builds, but it gives you a kind of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Something you can latch onto from the first second in the movie to the last second of the movie. I think it's magnificent. I also, and this is apropos of nothing, but I just want to speak to what I think is one of the best things I've ever seen in any movie, which is, and it's so good that they don't even put a fine point on it, which is what makes it so good, is off-screen Rip Taylor saying, of his conversation about Jim Morrison,
Right.
I said, "You sound more like a crooner in a rock milieu. I mean, that's like Greil Marcus level of rock criticism. Thrown away and in the mouth of Rip Taylor. And Mike Myers is a genius.
Oh, that's great.
That's why I think Mike Myers is an absolute genius. And there's, you know, the Sammy Davis Jr. stuff as well.
Right, Tim Meadows.
Like, what person in 1993 is thinking of like matching up Jim Morrison and Sammy Davis Jr.?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, only someone who
Sammy,
has
wait
like
up.
yeah, only someone who has this, like, you know, this kind of rich understanding of American pop culture history.
Yeah.
And I've got I don't know if, I don't think I have anything else except for the credit check.
Yeah, credit
but
check me.
The first part of my credit check is what you already
Right.
mentioned, the Ionized Cody, the riff on the crying Native American
Don't worry.
commercial.
We're going to clean it up.
And this just reminded me that this is a movie that knows exactly the right joke to make and exactly where to put it in the movie.
Mhm.
I can't think of a better... I cannot now tell you of a better post-credit sting out there.
Well, yeah.
It's just phenomenal. And again, like, it's ringing that comedy sponge. You know, it's like, we got one more
Yeah,
Native
right,
American
right,
joke in here. I can see a little drip of a Native American joke in here. But we're going to execute it perfectly, and we're going to have it at the credits when, you know, you're sort of least expecting it, or, you know, you're ready for this joke.
Well, this movie was a delightful surprise for me. Like I said, either earlier in this show or on our ranking episode, I was disappointed when I first saw it in the theater, and now I can't imagine why.
No.
That makes no sense to me. In talking about it, now I'm starting to waver on my ranking. Because I've spent just so much time gushing about it, but
no, your criticisms.
But my
are
criticisms
well
are, yeah, I mean, those are the...
They're definitely legitimate.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more credit
Yeah.
check. Which, if you can imagine such a thing, makes the Kenny G joke even funnier.
I don't remember. Did they...
There's a credit here late on in the credits. It says... It's basically saying Kenny G refused to let his actual music be used for this film. And that what you hear when they play Kenny G is actually an entirely original composition created by Carter Burwell.
Oh my God!
Carter Burwell wrote a perfect pastiche of a Kenny G riff
That's amazing.
for the purposes of this movie.
Yeah, I never would have thought it wasn't a Kenny G.
I know. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that's just twice as funny that we're able to, you know, we're making fun of Kenny G, and yet Kenny G is not agreeing to any of this.
Wow.
And one of the best composers in cinema has come along and said, "This is what Kenny G is.
That's amazing.
This is what it. Because there, you know, when I think of Kenny G, I think of Craig Ferguson's
Oh, right.
That's what I think of. But this is as good. So
Amazing.
audio, visual. This movie is working on all kinds of levels that just delight me. And you know, we haven't really said anything about the performances of Mike Myers and Dana Carvey.
Right.
Because there's so much amazing stuff going in this movie, it almost goes without saying that both
But they
of them
are
are incredible.
these two characters.
So these two characters, but their range as performers. When you see Dana Carvey break out into a Cary Grant impression, an excellent Cary Grant impression, I might add, then blowing bubbles out of a pipe.
Fuck.
It's because you're right that they embody the characters so perfectly. You kind of forget that these are guys who can sort of do anything.
That's the thing, is because the characters are so broad, but their performances of them are so grounded.
So grounded and so
Love it.
So so nuanced as well. And that's what's great when Odenkirk and Smeagol turn up, because you realize that like there are stereotypes in this movie, but Wayne and Garth are not stereotypes.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they're not caricatured. Nothing in this movie is caricatured, I would say, aside from maybe James Hong.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Purposefully
purposefully.
so. And just the way that in that sequence, which you mentioned about, I didn't say anything about, just the way that it
The fight sequence, you mean?
yeah, just the way that it reproduces the look and feel and editing style of a actual martial arts
yeah,
movie
exactly.
I've never seen. It was so much effort. I mean, the sequence achieves its full potential because they pay attention to every aspect of film, whether it's the dubbing, the subtitles, the zooms, the cutting, and this is not even this it's kind of you see a sequence like that and you think this movie really does not need to have this to be good.
Right, right.
It's not an Abrams Zucker movie where if you don't get that stuff right, it looks terrible.
Bad, right?
This is an additional pleasure, and they have put so much thought and effort and knowledge into this one sequence, which could easily be edited out of the film without any loss.
Right. Well, and of course,
It's
next we're
astounding.
gonna be talking about
Yeah.
Hot Shots Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm realizing right now there might be a single joke in that movie, early in that movie, that catapulted the movie to the top of my list.
That's okay.
So I'm excited to talk about it. But ladies
I
and
could
gentlemen,
easily say the same about YMCA here.
right.
That was the moment I
Right.
knew nothing would beat it.
Well,
Nothing would beat it.
ladies and gentlemen, tell us what you think of Wayne's World 2. We're unabashed fans. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. You know who he is. He's going to give you a quote. Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, signing off with Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Give it to him, Tom.
We'll be sure to cross the T's and dot the lowercase J's. Arguably the best line in the
Probably.
movie.
Yeah.
Arguably.
One of them.
But it has some strong competition.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, Hot Shots Part 2, another 1993 movie.